You're on the air. We're on air.
Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us on this Google Hangout, this Latino Educational Google Hangout. My name is Monica Ceballos, and I'm with the New Latino Movement. We are an organization that trains, engages, empowers, and connects young progressive Latinos with online and on-the-ground strategies. New Latino Voices is a project that we started in order to give young Latinos the experience of being able to comment on different policy issues through webinars, through Google Hangouts, and through webcasts. I also wanted to introduce Latino Giant, who has partnered with us for this Latino Educational Hangout, Jose Aristimuño.
Hey everybody, my name is Jose Aristimuño. I am the founder of Latino Giant, an organization that works to empower and motivate Latinos across the country. We do this by doing educational hangouts like this. We do it by doing workshops and motivational speaking events all throughout the country. We also have a motivational blog where Latinos all across the country are successful, write about their experiences in hope of motivating others to be successful as well. We want to start by thanking our panelists for coming and taking time out of their busy schedules and being with us here today. And we also want to thank everybody who's watching us from across the United States and the world.
All right, well, I'm going to be obviously immigration reform is a really hot button issue right now. The bill just passed yesterday in the Senate, and there are so many different components of this that we are trying to make sure that everybody understands, that everyone is able to really grasp what's going on with the immigration reform debate. Today we're going to try to take some time to kind of break it down and explain what the different components are, how they're going to affect us, and what this debate is all about. So we have different parts of strengthening our borders, which has been an ongoing process and is also in the new legislation. Interior enforcement, that has to do with E-Verify and employers hiring undocumented immigrants. And then a real path to citizenship. That is probably the most important component that we are trying to solve with immigration policy, as well as finding legal immigration system for families, workers, and employers.
All right, well, let's get this show on the road. We'll start with, I guess we'll start by introducing our speakers. First, we have Pilar Marrero. Hey, Pilar.
Hello,
Pilar,
how are you?
Pilar is one of the foremost experts on immigration policy, politics, and U.S. media. She's written a book on the subject called Killing the American Dream. She's a journalist with experience of over 25 years, and she's covered areas extensively, city government, immigration, and statewide, as well as national politics. In June of 2011, the California-Chicago News Media Association awarded her a Career Achievement Award. She is currently a journalist for La Opinión newspaper, the largest and oldest Spanish language daily paper in America.
Hello, how are you? I'm glad to be here.
Alrighty, well, let's get started. One of the first, if you could just start, I know a lot of your background comes about our political climate, the political climate in America. We know that the last immigration policy that got passed in the country was in 1986. Today, 2012, 2013 is a very different time. Things have changed. If you can just talk a little bit about what is the difference in terms of political climate today, and just talk a little bit about this new bill. What does it contain in terms of pathway to citizenship and things like that?
Well, interestingly enough, the climate is not that different from the one that we had back in 1986 when the Amnesty Law, the Immigration Control and Reform Act of 1986 or 1985 was passed. It was passed in 1985. There were about 3 to 5 million undocumented immigrants back then. There was a discussion over what to do with them. And at the time, the Congress got together and pushed through this bill that ended up legalizing about 3 million people, including 1 million under an agricultural program. The president back then was Ronald Reagan, a Republican, as we all know, and we had a split Congress. We had half of the Congress was the Senate was a Democrat, and the House was the other way around. I think it was. Anyway, one of the houses was a Democrat, and one of the houses was a Republican. I can't remember which one. The difference is the current climate after 20 years of immigration restrictive policies and enforcement-only policies is much more conducive to a more complicated law that is going to require a very detailed implementation. Many more immigrants are present undocumented in the United States, and there's the issue of what to do with future flows of immigration. Part of the problem of 1986 is that the law did not deal with the future flows of immigration, and it did not deal significantly with the enforcement issue. So what happened was we had the legalization component of it passed, and it was actually achieved, but the rest of the bill was not either achieved or wasn't even passed. So the reality is that back a few years after, we are back having several million undocumented immigrants in the United States. The point of this time around is to fix the system, to reform future immigration, and to sort of create a system that is more conducive to having legal immigration instead of undocumented immigration.
Thank you so much for that brief overview of the past immigration reform bills. I wanted to just remind all of our viewers that we are taking questions for these panelists on hashtag Latino Chat on Twitter. So please be sure to follow the conversation online and let us know your questions that we'll be asking them after everyone goes over a little brief summary of their topic. Next, I have Guillermo Cantor. He is a senior policy analyst at the Immigration Policy Center, where he leads the center's research efforts. He also currently teaches courses on immigration and introductory sociology at Georgetown University. He has authored several publications on immigrant incorporation in the United States and Argentina. Thank you so much for joining us today, Guillermo. I was hoping that you can give us an overview of earned citizenship and discuss the proposed requirements for current undocumented immigrants, and also talking about streamlining the legal immigration process, which means keeping families together, startup visas, investor visas for economic development, and reduction of some visas for relatives of U.S. citizens, while expanding visas for immigrants and staff.
Great. Well, thank you first, all of you, for having me and to discuss this issue. This event is actually very timely, and we didn't know that we would be discussing an actual bill today, which is a very good thing for those of us who have been working on this for a long time. The question is very big because obviously it touches upon two of the main components of this bill. One is what to do with the 11 million undocumented immigrants that are already living in the country, that are invested in this country, that they have their families, that they have been working for years and they have been paying taxes and did not have any horizon of hope or any clear roadmap of how to build a life here. So I think that providing a clear pathway to citizenship with a very specific steps. Some people will criticize that maybe it is too burdensome to go through all these requirements, but at the same time, it shows the willingness to provide a solution to a topic that has been not addressed for so many years. So I think that there is something good to highlight there. There are requirements, of course. Some of the requirements are going to be costly. It's not going to be easy. It's going to take time. We are thinking of 13 years. We're thinking of paying fees and fines and paying taxes, there are a lot of very specific requirements that would allow people who have been undocumented for a long time to earn citizenship. So for those people who are talking about amnesty, that is just incorrect. This is a pathway to earn citizenship by doing the right things and by offering realistic solutions to people. And then, as Pilar mentioned before, this is also a very interesting proposal because it provides a very much needed update to our current regulation of legal immigration. And I think that we'll see some changes in the family immigration. We see that in your question you asked me about what happens with some categories of family that are not going to be included. Yes, we do have some changes there. In principle, we are losing one of the categories, which is the family, the sibling category. However, there are like some new routes for siblings of American citizens who would eventually be able to apply through other categories and receive points in the point system. But there are also some interesting changes in employment-based visas, which will allow people to apply to this kind of visa through different channels that didn't exist in the past, or through the same channels that would have a more realistic allocations of visas on an annual basis. So I think that overall we have an interesting proposal here.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Guillermo. Next up, we have Dulce Matus. Dulce was voted one of Times Magazine's most influential people in the world. She's an undocumented Latina. She was born in Mexico. Matus immigrated to the United States at the age of 15 years old. She graduated from Arizona State University with a bachelor's degree in electrical engineering, but she has been unable to find employment without having the right documents. She has been recognized numerous times for her activism. In addition to the Time Magazine list, she has been named one of the 40 Hispanic leaders under 40 by Latino Perspectives magazine. It's great to have you, Dulce. Thank you for taking the time to join us. If you could please just talk a little bit, I know you're very familiar with the DREAM Act. I know that Dreamers are going to be affected by this legislation if it were to pass. So if you could just please talk a little bit about Dreamers, how are they going to be affected by this legislation, and also the whole notion about keeping families together. We know that there are family-based visas, and if you could just share a little bit about that, it would be great.
Thank you for having me. When I've been reading the bill, I was pleased to see that Dreamers are in this expedited route for citizenship. They're going to be required to have 5 years of registered provisional immigrant status. And after that, they can receive their green card, and immediately they can apply for their citizenship. I was also very pleased to see that there's no age cap on the Dreamers. So right now, anybody that entered the United States before the age of 16, graduates from high school, and has good moral character will be beneficiary of the DREAM Act. So those are two victories that I was able to see in the immigration bill. However, there are concerns that we have seen in other portions of the bill. Like our movement is being led by LGBTQ activists. And on this immigration bill, we see that our LGBTQ brothers and sisters are being left out. I also see that we have shifted from a family-based to a merit-based program. I myself am an advocate of STEM programs, but and I have a bachelor's degree in electrical engineering, but my success wouldn't be possible without the support of my family. So I don't know how we expect to have all these high-skilled workers to be successful in the land of opportunity without their family support. And lastly, we live here in Ground Zero for Immigration in the state of Arizona, and we have seen how there's mechanisms to weed out immigrants from applying
even for deferred action, and now for immigration. We know that the victims of Joe Arpaio and the victims of Bill Montgomery, who are being unfairly incarcerated without bond because they were working with a made-up social, they might not qualify for this immigration bill because they're being charged with the fullest penalty of the law, and they may be charged with felonies. So there's light, there's concerns, and we understand that there's not such a thing as a perfect bill. But as a community, we need to have that commitment to continue pressuring and pushing for what we care about, which is family unification and promoting the educational success of immigrant youth.
Dulce, thank you so much for breaking that down for us. I think what you mentioned and your perspective on it is great to inform everyone about. I think a lot of the youth have been out here advocating for the dreamers, and to know that there is no age requirement, that's a great victory and a great success. But to hear the downfalls of the advocates who have also been following us, the LGBT community, that portion of the community, for us to know as well. I'm going to move on and introduce Christian Ramos. He is NDN's Policy Director of the 21st Century Border Initiative. He also works on immigration, Hispanic demographics, and the Southwest border. Before working at NDN, Christian worked in the United States Senate with Majority Leader Harry Reid in the Senate Democratic Communications Center. Christian, can you talk to us a little bit about all the border security pieces that have to do, the border security elements that has to do with the new legislation that was proposed, and also just give us a little bit of background about what has been done. If you can talk to us also a little bit about the interior enforcement and the jobs and the E-Verify for some of the undocumented workers as well, that would be great.
All right, well, first of all, I wanted to thank you guys for having me here. I know New Latino Voices, the New Latino Movement, and Latino Giant done a great job of raising up a lot of these voices on this stuff, and we've seen a lot of great work in the elections, which has led us to this point in time where we're actually on the cusp of debating immigration reform in the Senate and passing this thing out, and it's been an incredible ride. So just getting right into things, I have to say the border has never been safer. Our immigration system is better, and at the end of the day, Mexico is modernizing and growing, and that's a significant thing when we're looking at what this immigration legislation sets out to do. First of all, the pathway to citizenship and the concept of a legal status is directly tied into metrics on both interior and border enforcement. So what does that mean? That means 6 months after the legislation is enacted, the Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security is going to submit a border security plan, add a border fence plan. Once that plan has been submitted to Congress and the President, those people that are eligible for registered provisional immigrant status can begin the process of going into that. So that's a form of legal status that will actually affect a large segment of the undocumented population in the United States. After those 5 years, the legislation is being enacted, DHS must achieve 100% border enforcement visibility, which is that they are knowing what is coming over the border, and at least 90% apprehension rates in high-risk sectors of the U.S.-Mexico border. So I mentioned earlier about the border is safer, immigration system's better, and Mexico is modernized and growing. This is a significant part of this whole question here. Whether these are realistic goals, absolutely they are. If you're talking about apprehension rates, which is what they're looking at as one of the metrics here, places like the Arizona border sector is already at 87%. A lot of the areas that we're talking about on the border within 5 years, absolutely it's a realistic to think that we can get 90% apprehensions and 100% of monitoring on that southwest border. The other thing that is significant here is Mexico's middle class is self-sustaining at this point. Their economy is growing, and the number of children that Mexican families are having are no longer at the number that they were during the last migration, which is to say they're quite simply at zero net migration from Mexico to this, at this point in time. So I think those are absolutely realistic expectations there within 5 years. However, if DHS fails to meet that goal, then a border commission will be created to implement a plan to achieve those. However, if that condition is met, then those who are in registered provisional immigrant status or some form of legalization, they can move on to legal permanent residence after that period is over. After 10 years have gone by, then Congress comes back and checks that there's been a mandatory enhanced E-Verify in effect, which includes, that's an interior enforcement provision, which would require all employers be able to use the E-Verify for all non-citizen workers in their thing, and also biometric work authorization cards and biometric green cards. If they are able to prove that they've done that, then all of those who are in legal permanent residence will be eligible for citizenships 3 years later. So absolutely all of these things are achievable, and I have to say, if we had this conversation 3 months ago, the notion that we would have any legislation that is bipartisan with a pathway to citizenship would be laughed at. So I think we made great progress here, and I think we're going to see a significant movement forward in the coming months.
Thank you very much, Christian, for such an in-depth information when it comes to border security and enforcement. Now we're going to move into our next segment of the Google Hangout, and we're going to be talking about some of the most intriguing questions that people are asking. As we all know, the Senate's Gang of Eight released their immigration bill earlier today. So my next question will be for Pilar, and the question is, what factors would you say have contributed to putting immigration reform on the forefront in our nation's political agenda?
Well, we all know that one of the factors behind this is the demographic growth of the Latino community. Can you hear me, guys? Okay. Is the demographic growth of the Latino community, and in particular, the results of the elections in November. We saw a very significant participation of Latinos back in November after a campaign that was marked by a lot of talk about self-deportation and a lot of negative talk about immigrants, and also that capped, what has been almost 20 years of enforcement only, and frustrations with deportations and separations of families, et cetera, et cetera. So Latinos actually became, Latinos and others really became upset over the tone of the policy and the rhetoric, and they came out and voted and rejected the option presented by the Republicans of an enforcement only proposition. So I think that's probably the one issue, the one moment, or the one factor that has pushed this through. I mean, as our colleague just said, 3 months ago, this could not have, or 6 months ago, this could not have been dreamed of. I also think there's another factor, and it is the fact that the anti-immigrant rhetoric is no longer going unchallenged. And I think part of it is because there's a lot of vocal Latinos, there's a lot of new media, there's a lot of social media, there's a lot of groups like you and others. There's a lot of us who are out there constantly talking about this issue and challenging some of these rhetoric and this tone that we have seen in the discussion. It used to be that you could freely insult immigrants without any kind of repercussion, and I think that is changing, not just at the electoral ballot box, but also in social media and just plainly in society. We're no longer taking this kind of talk and this kind of rhetoric, and we are reacting to it. So I think there's a lot of things that are happening. It's sort of like the perfect storm.
Great. Thank you so much for that answer. The next question is for Guillermo. According to the Senate's bill language, the legislation offers a pathway to citizenship for undocumented immigrants by allowing individuals to apply for permanent resident card after 10 years. Then 3 years after that, those individuals can apply for citizenship. So we're looking at a minimum of 13 years before some of these folks will become full members of the American society. Do you think that this is a fair amount of time? What are your thoughts?
Well, one thing is what I personally think, but I also try to understand this in the context this was framed. Yes, of course, if you ask me, what do you think of this time frame? I do think it's long, and I think that 13 years is a very long time in the life of any person. But at the same time, I also acknowledge that there were some very specific political constraints that led to this decision. One is this idea that there needed to be shown to the public at large, but also to some of the skeptical political actors, that this wasn't a free gift, that this was not going to be easy, and that this would take some effort, and that citizenship is a high price, like a very precious price that the country has to offer, and that it needed to be earned. And so I think that that was one of the aspects that was behind this decision of making this pathway like last so long. At the same time, we had some other like not so open but very important fiscal aspects that were considered when that decision was made, which was there was an intention to make sure that when, well, any bill has to get this scoring by the CBO, that takes into account the cost that a new legislation would entail. And frankly, if like citizenship would be obtained before the 10-year mark, the numbers and the likelihood that the cost would be very high, and the score would be like not so good, would make it very difficult for this bill to become a law. So I think that there were some pragmatic reasons why this time frame was decided, and I think that the good part of this is that it provides, like at least the bill we have today, we will see what happens after the markup, but the bill we have today provides a very clear roadmap to citizenship, which is something that would give people peace of mind. And also during this time, like during the 10 years, people will be allowed to work, will be allowed to leave the country, visit their families overseas, which I think are a big achievement. So there's always some compromise, and some aspects we may like better than others, but I'm definitely like convinced that this is better than what the situation is now. And this, including like citizenship as the endpoint, is a very important, I think, victory for those who have been fighting for this for a long time.
Does anybody else have anything to add to that? What are your thoughts on 13 years? Is that too much? Is that long enough?
I have to say that I have heard from some of my friends and people that I know that are undocumented, and they, most of them say they would be relieved to just have the ability to travel, to have the ability to work legally. Some of them, one of my friends said, well, I have been putting money in the Social Security Trust Fund for 20 years, and I would like to have access to that, but and that's not considered in the bill at this point. So, but the other thing is that in the bill that we're seeing today, the fact that people who are in the process of deportation would be able to apply. The people who have final orders of deportation would be able to apply, and some people who have already been deported will be able to apply under certain conditions. So I think that if that is sustained, that's a pretty generous benefit.
Go
I would have to add.
Go ahead, Dulce.
I would just have to add that this is just the initial conversation and debate, and we are yet to see amendments and additional changes that they might happen on the bill. So I think 13 years is just starting the debate, but yet we have to push to continue for something that is going to benefit our communities, because we don't know if anybody out there is going to be changing these guidelines. And also is that sometimes we want things to go faster, but also we have to be pragmatic and the things that are happening in the ground in reality here in Arizona, that we still have rates that are houses that are being raided, work sites that are being raided, and family separation. So my biggest concern is that I don't want this bill to be synced in a black hole, because we're just lagging debate, and we're not actually putting it on the Senate floor to get those 60 votes and then moving to the House.
Just to
follow up,
underline that real quick. Just underline that real quick. I think it has to be pointed out that the stuff that's going on with the DREAM Act and the legislation is a significant victory for a lot of people. And I think the movement from legal status within 6 months to a year is also a significant movement forward. And I have to agree with Dulce that at the end of the day, this is a process that hasn't seen itself all the way through, and there may be some things that are added there that can alleviate and fix that. But I think as a start, again, I go back to the 6-month timeline. This is way better than anybody thought we would be at this point in time today.
That's true.
And Dulce, let me just circle back with you for just a second. I know you founded the Arizona Dream Act Coalition. What are folks saying back home in Arizona? What are they saying about this bill? What do they feel? The Dreamers, are they looking for something more in this bill, or are they satisfied with what we've seen from the Senate side yet?
I think that our biggest concern right now is not being inclusive of the LGBTQ family. And one of the things that we have been able to seen so many successes in the immigrant youth or in the immigrant movement is because youth have been involved and also are being willing to come out as undocumented and unafraid. Let's not forget that last year we got deferred action, and that was the first victory we have seen in decades. Yes, we mobilized the Latino vote. Yes, we have this bill, but sometimes it feels that the process is not going fast enough. And maybe it's because just we're young people and we want things to be faster. But our biggest concern is that the LGBTQ families are being left out. And I think that I agree that the 5-year waiting time for Dreamers and the expedited process is a success. But I think we need to continue pushing for more, because if we don't continue pushing, if we don't continue with the pressure, politicians are just gonna drop it, or they're just gonna try to do the minimum amount of work that they have to.
I just want to remind the audience that if you have any questions, please use the hashtag Latino Chat. We have one for Christian from the Twitter, and it's Senator Marco Rubio says the bill is tough but humane. Do you think the bill is tough enough to satisfy Republicans in both the Senate and the House?
I think it absolutely will satisfy in the Senate. The big question mark here is always what's going to happen in the House, and we really do have to take that in consideration when we're talking about this. You know, a lot of people have expressed frustration with the length of time and the border triggers. I think a lot of that is designed to get people in the House, to get support from people like a Rand Paul, who have supported some of this stuff in principle, to really join in and push something across the finish line. The particular pieces of the border trigger legislation that are in the Senate version actually came from legislation in the House from Mike McCall. So I think that what is positive about all of this is both the Republicans and the Senate Democrats who came together on this are being strategic and pragmatic about moving something forward through both chambers of Congress.
Great, thank you, Christian. We have another question from Twitter from Selena Ceja, and she asked, are there any agreements on sponsorship of immediate family members by U.S. citizens in the new immigration bill? Any of you guys want to take a stab at that? Pilar?
There are some changes in the visa categories, and that's somebody was mentioning this before, that right now 75% of family visas go to family reunification, and the rest go to job skills or to employment. And now they want to reduce this to 50-50, and they want to introduce some merit-based system, similar to what it exists in other countries, like in Canada, for example, where you would have to add points in order to qualify for a visa. So there are some changes in the categories. Citizens citizens can sponsor direct family, minor children, and there are some changes to that, which I can't find right now. But there will be discussion about changing some of the family priorities to a more merit-based priority for people who have, for example, high levels of education or work experience, or even family ties will be considered part of that system of points. So it seems that they really want to get into some real reforms and changes, and we have yet to see whether that's good or bad. We have to see what the end result is.
Thank you. We have another question, and I think this is something that everyone can kind of chime into. What would you consider to be the biggest misconception with immigration reform? What elements within the immigration reform debate do you think are often misunderstood by the public?
I think that one of the biggest misconceptions is that everybody that or most people that live in the United States without legal status just cross the border. A lot of them are visa overstayers, and that we just need to be careful that we're not spending too much economic resources in the border, when in fact not everybody comes through the border. And I think another is that taxes. I mean, we've been paying taxes for a long time. I yet have visited a store that tells me, no, I'm not going to charge you sales tax because you're undocumented. So we pay sales tax, we pay property taxes if we own property, or indirectly if we rent. And in many occasions, we have an individual tax identification number where we can file our tax returns. So I think those are the two biggest misconceptions, and that people need to understand better.
I want to add something. Can I add something to that?
Go ahead, Guillermo.
Yes. No, I think that one of the misconceptions that I happen to see a lot is this idea that employment-based and family-based immigration is like go against each other, and there is a zero-sum game. And if we have like less family, if we increase the number of employment-based visa, we have to decrease the number of family-based visa, when it's not actually the case, or it shouldn't be the case. And to go with that, I saw that in the New York Times this morning there was an article that they were saying that what Pilar just said, that it would be like a 50-50 system. It's like half of the visa would go to employment and would be taken away from family, which is not really what the bill says anywhere. And I scrutinized the family section because that's one of my areas of expertise, and there are some positive changes there that I wanted to highlight. And one of them is that there is a reclassification of children and spouses of legal permanent residents, and that's a huge deal, because people who are married had to wait for years if they were coming from certain countries to be able to bring their spouses or their children. So they are now considered immediate relatives, and they are not going to be capped at any level. And the other thing that I do agree with Dulce is that one thing that we're hoping to see in the family visa category is to have an inclusion of LGBT families, and to like change the concept of family that the law is based on.
Thank you, Guillermo. We also have another question from one of our Twitter followers, and he goes like this: if we get Congress to pass an immigration bill this year, how do you see this impacting jobs and the economy? Specifically, can you talk about people in the agricultural sector? How will they be affected by this bill? Pilar, you want to take a stab at this?
Yeah, one of the misconceptions I was going to add, but this is what's in the question as well, is that people who are here undocumented, if they left, automatically the economy would get better because there would be all these jobs for everyone else. Well, we know that is not the case. All these immigrants that are here are not just doing certain kinds of jobs that many of them people are not available to do here. They have the flexibility to move around the country, especially in occupations like agriculture and similar ones. But they also contribute. They also pay taxes. They also contribute to create other jobs. So and we have all kinds of studies and calculations talking about how the legalization of these immigrants will increase the economic output. It would increase the taxes they pay, would increase the risks they would take and the investment they would take in the future of this country, and it would actually be a stimulant to the economy. As a stimulant to the economy, it would help out other families and other sectors of the economy. In terms of the agricultural sector, we know what happened. When some of these state laws were passed, Arizona, Alabama, Georgia, how some of the crops were rotting in the fields because immigrants just picked up and left and said, well, we're not going to stay here, so they moved to different states. So what the agricultural and other business communities want is a steady, legal labor force, and what the unions want is a labor force that is legal and therefore cannot be abused. So it's sort of a compromise between those two, which has brought them together in agreeing to some of these provisions. So it's not perfect what we're seeing, but I think it will significantly help in stabilizing the labor force and in improving the economy of the United States.
Great, thank you so much, Pilar. Well, that wraps up our Google Hangout. I just wanted to thank everybody for participating on Twitter. I wanted to thank our panelists and let everybody know that we are going to be continuing to have these Latino educational Google Hangouts every month. Our next one will be discussing education policy, and it will be on May 22nd. So please stay tuned. Thank you again for joining.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.